What up, guys? Today we're witnessing Tiananmen Square 2.0, Chinese students protesting against the CCP. I hope you know how dangerous this is. But the first sequel, or the original Tiananmen Square, I want to say thousands of students were killed. They brought tanks out, they brought everyone out. There's this one guy, he stood in front of the tank man. Never seen him again. But now they're doing Tiananmen Square 2.0. Let's get into it.
Something shocking is happening in China. Chinese citizens are now openly calling for the overthrow of Xi Jinping. Just a few days ago, a Chinese university dean and her deputy openly published a signed manifesto. In this manifesto, they called for Chinese students to rise up and topple the government of Xi Jinping, much like the Tiananmen Square protests of 1989. The manifesto warns students that
they're both
going
gonna
to
disappear.
Today,
they're gonna be
they
gone.
will become another victim of history tomorrow. It tells the
Some
students
sleeper
to demand
agent
for
is gonna come
democracy,
up.
freedom.
A sleeper agent is gonna come up and deem it as suicide. They're both gonna disappear. I call it. I just know.
And human rights. The message here is clear. They want China to stop being a country of lies and violence, but rather become a democracy with the rule of law and justice. They want Xi Jinping's dictatorship to end.
That's
This
gonna
letter
be
is
hard.
then signed with the author's name and picture.
Yeah.
To do something
smart.
like this in
So
China,
smart.
especially right now, takes a kind of courage that we cannot
bold.
even imagine. Just months ago, an economist called out the party for lying about GDP numbers. That economist has not been seen since.
Look at that.
These professors are openly speaking out against Xi Jinping, and it's
Look at that. If you talk bad about anything that's China, anything that's CCP, anything that's the dictator, you're gonna disappear. You saw that Economist. What happened? You saw Jack Ma. Jack Ma. He said something about the CCP and he just disappeared. And when he came back, he refused to talk about it.
and it's impossible to overstate that this does not happen in a country like China. Last time Chinese students asked for democracy and the rule of law, the CCP brought out tanks and massacred its own
Look
citizens.
at that. That was
Democracy
Tank
and
Man.
The rule of law. The CCP.
That was Tank Man. He stood in front of the tank. That was like the only picture taken. And they try to find him after. Can't find him. Even after years, can't find him. Definitely gone.
Brought out tanks and massacred its own citizens. Thousands of students were
Own
killed
citizens
for wanting
is crazy.
freedom. And worse yet, the party erased their memories from Chinese history. According to the CCP, nothing happened on June 4th, 1989. In fact, Xi Jinping is still spending billions to rewrite the history of that night. Here is a pro-CCP account lying about how it was Americans who were killed at
Around 300 people died. Most were soldiers murdered by U.S.-funded agitators and workers. Oh shit. That's crazy. It's saying the Americans has planted agitators, people that cause problems. Imagine that as your job, just gaslighting people. That'd be a fire job. All right, not Tiananmen Square. Let's not get canceled here. Not people dying, but imagine you go to protests or you go to parades and you just cause havoc. It's probably a law against that, like disturbing the peace or something.
Tiananmen. Sadly, this fake history got 500,000 views on Twitter, and that's because CCP bots promote this content that pushes the CCP's narrative. When we tried covering the true story of what happened that night, our video was heavily downvoted by CCP bots. Because of that, it got less than 50,000 views. That's why, if there's any video where I need your help the most, it's this one. If you guys can please take a second and hit that like button and subscribe button down below, it truly does help us defeat the CCP bots. And if you think more people need to learn the truth about the CCP, then please share this on your social media accounts. Let's go over how the CCP killed
What are we gonna
democracy in China.
We're not gonna do
now,
anything.
Most of you likely know what happened on the 4th of June, 1989. But the story of how the CCP got there is one that's getting lost in history. The story that the CCP wants the world to forget. A story they have already erased from Chinese history. To truly understand how we got to June 4th, 1989, we actually have...
I think if you search up Tiananmen Square on DeepSeek, it's not even on there. Like, it won't even say anything about it. I think you could ask ChatGPT. It's not censored. But DeepSeek, censored.
To back up to when Mao died. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Mao, he was the founder of the CCP and also the first chairman of the party. We can actually make a video on just his life.
A lot of old Chinese people really like Mao Zedong. Like a lot, they really like him, even though he caused like mass starvation just for the people to for the common good. That was a saying. So many people died. I forget, maybe millions. I'm not sure. Like hundreds of thousands at least. But they all say like, oh, for the greater good. A lot of the old people, they really like him for some reason. I don't know why. Even though he killed so many people, they're like pro-communist.
Today, I'm just going to focus on the parts that are important to this story. Mao was a big old communist. He truly loved communism, even though his policies killed tens of millions of people.
Tens of millions? Tens of millions? Okay, we're sitting at like 8 billion people now. Imagine back then how many people were in the world, like tens of millions. That's a lot of people.
Plans were so bad that he had to resign as chairman of the country in 1959. But he continued causing problems for people who tried to stir the country away from his failed policies. And that's how we got the Cultural Revolution. That, again, deserves a video in itself. Mao used the students in the country to kill and root out many opponents. Basically, people who didn't want his brand of communism. His authoritarian communism known as Maoism. This is important, as students
like comply or die
later on, too. So when he died, things changed, and they changed fast. This guy came into power, Deng Xiaoping. When compared to Mao, he was like Adam Smith. He wanted China to open up, embrace more capitalism, and become a rule-of-law country. He went to Singapore and noticed how fast the country had improved. It had gone from a third world country to
How do they even look for leaders for the new country? Like, do they just go into a nursing home? Or no, is that called a nursing home? Like an adult daycare, adult nursing home? They're like, all right, he's the oldest. He's 106. Elect him for president. He's the oldest. He's the most wise. Well, he can't even drink soup. Can't even drink water from a cup. You have to, you have to put an IV on him. Is that how America is starting to elect its presidents? Like people are getting old. Joe Biden, mad old. Even Trump, what is he, like 70 something? I don't know if they're built like for that amount of stress anymore. Maybe when they were younger, like in their prime, excellent. But now, bro, they're like 70, 80. What are they doing? Just retire, have a good life.
A first world country in just a few decades. Best of all, he was ecstatic to see that it was not a capitalist, free speech, and democracy-loving place like the USA. It was still an authoritative regime, but one that was rich and successful.
Is so old. That's crazy.
Deng wanted to do the same with China. He famously said, "It doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice." Meaning, he wanted the economy to work, and that's the only goal. It doesn't really matter how it works. He was not concerned.
That's a fact. That's how I think. It's like, you look at the parties. Take America, for example. You have the Democrats and the Republicans. It's like, it doesn't matter if you vote for one or the other. It only matters if you make money. What's the name of the game? It's making money. Like, they think, oh, if I side with this person, I'm going to make money. No. Whatever side wins, you have to make money regardless. So why don't you just focus on making money and just let that play out? Doesn't change that much. Like sometimes I ask a couple of my friends, and some of them they own stores, they own whatever. They're like, "No, I don't vote." I'm like, "Why don't you vote?" He's like, What does it change? It doesn't change anything." It's like if this guy wins, if that guy wins, I still have to make money. They don't give me shit, and yeah, that's true. So now it's more like whatever wins, whatever you identify as, the name of the game is just make money and make a good life for yourself. There's no like why you it's like dividing yourself for no reason. Name of the game, just make money, live your life.
Concerned with making sure that government actions fit within a predetermined definition of communism or socialism. He was far more concerned with the question of does it work? If something works
Exactly.
somewhere, well, let's try it. And if it's fine in
Exactly.
China, let's continue it. If it doesn't work, toss it out and let's try another one. That's how Singapore became successful. And that's how Deng wants China to be successful. An important note is that Deng wanted just economic reforms, not political ones. People were not about to get freedom of speech and democracy, no. But there were people in the party who wanted more. Meaning they wanted political reforms, more transparency, and all that Western BS like democracy. One of the people was Deng's own protege, Hu Yaobang. Deng and Hu had been jailed together multiple times before and during the Cultural Revolution of Mao.
They've been jailed
They trusted
for what?
each other. So in 1981, Deng made Hu party general secretary, second highest position in the party after Chairman Deng. They worked closely together to bring all the changes that China went through during the 1980s. They both also wanted to set up a generational change system in the party so leaders at the top don't cling to power until their last dying breath. They wanted young leadership involved in the decision-making process and older leaders to retire at an appropriate age.
That'll make sense.
But the speed at which they both wanted this differed greatly, and this is where the problem started. Deng believes this process would take 10 to 15 years to fully implement. He was 82. He didn't think he would live to see the end.
What?
This didn't mean he didn't want to start the generational change system. He was actually happy to retire at the next Congress.
That's pretty
but
old.
He knew others would not be on board so quickly.
Especially
then there's
back
the question
then.
of who will be next and who will be in line to replace the positions the next leaders leave open. Hu, on the other hand, wanted to move fast. Similar to Deng, he was okay with retiring soon and starting the generational change system. In fact, he had already picked out young leaders who should become part of the CCP. Others in the party who weren't on board with retiring yet
apparently they could get voted out any day.
Opportunistic by Hu. They believed that he just wanted to increase the power of his faction, a faction that favored more openness and transparency, while other people didn't want to give up this power quite yet. Hu didn't realize that Deng was not as sure of the generational change system as he was. Deng wanted it, but he still had other people in his ear saying it's not a good idea. Things may be moving too fast. One of those people was Li Peng, who also had a close relationship with Deng, but like Hu,
he looks fried
was
as hell.
Quite opposed to his viewpoints. This is the beginning of the conflict that starts within the CCP, that eventually leads to what happened at Tiananmen Square, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Talking about moving fast, the speed at which Deng's regime was changing the economic policy, well, problems were bound to happen. Before, students were pretty much guaranteed a job by the CCP when they graduated.
Oh, wow.
And now they had to compete for jobs because of this new system. On top of that, corruption was rampant. Jobs were supposed to be merit-based, but in reality, it was more political. Your dad is a party official, you get a job without even interviewing. Yeah. Students felt like they got all the hard parts about the new system, but not the benefits.
So that's still how it works in China. It's like, if you have connections in China, bro, you're set. Like, you could do whatever you want. I got this Chinese teacher. He would tell me. He's like, oh, when we came to America, we went to Woodbury outlets. We bought LV wallets, Burberry wallets, whatever it is. Just bought a whole bunch, brought it to China, and just passed it to all the officials, all the diplomats, all the cops in the village, in the town, and they could just park anywhere. Like, they just won't ticket his car. He could park anywhere. And that's how you gain favors with them. You just bribe them.
So, there were big protests in 1986 around many major campuses in China. The size of the demonstrations shocked the government. Unlike the Cultural Revolution, the government was determined not to lose control over the student groups. Hu was close to the student and young leaders, so he didn't really criticize the protest. On top of that, one of his job responsibilities was to stop any opposition against the new CCP's policy, which he also didn't do because he kind of agreed with the students. They wanted more freedom and more fair structure in the economy. They wanted reforms even faster. And so did he. Deng didn't really like this. Deng asked to get things under control and fire the two student leaders who were spearheading the protests. while also being members of the CCP party.
Honestly, it's like how fast can you change a society? Like everyone is used to one thing, and all of a sudden you just change it the next day. It's gonna take a while. Like look at COVID. How hard was it to adjust to only staying home? Of course, they come out with scare tactics. They're like, oh, it's like 90%, 90% fatality, but it wasn't really that. They just offered scare tactics and how contagious it was just to keep us in our home. They use scare tactics, but imagine if you do something that's culturally based. I'm trying to think of an example, but I'm not too sure. Let's say they change everything to digital currency. Like your dollars are worth nothing. You have to change it to this digital dollar. Imagine how much havoc that would wreak. Imagine people that have millions of dollars in just cash that they haven't paid tax on, what they would do. Imagine the people that they don't have a phone. I mean, kind of rare now, but that's a major disruption in cult, like culturally, culture. Yeah, whatever.
Party, who completely denies firing the student leaders, as he still believed young leaders should have more say in the party, not less. So Hu was forced to resign from the party's general secretary position. This was a big change, since Hu was in line to replace Deng as the party leader, and now it's Zhao Ziyang who takes Hu's place as general secretary. Li Peng was now the party premier, third highest position in the party. But he was still part
Honestly,
of the inner circle.
I didn't know there was so many leading up to Xi Jinping.
One thing Deng didn't realize yet is that Xiao actually also kinda agreed with Hu and student leaders.
I think Xi Jinping only been in office for like 8 years or something.
Was still a staunch red-blooded
But I keep thinking he's been in there for like 20 years.
Doing things. The infighting among the top leaders is about to get even worse, as we will soon see. On top of forcing Hu to resign, the party also forced him to publicly criticize all the mistakes he has made, like pushing for freedom and democracy. It was a move to humiliate him and weaken his
Yeah,
supporters.
that's messed up.
Unfortunately, the public, especially the students, saw this as what it was. Instead of hurting Hu's reputation, it actually strengthened the loyalty among his supporters. Hu became an example of a man who refused to compromise his convictions in the face of political resistance, and who had paid the price as a result. Though he maintained his position in the Politburo, it was mostly just for namesake. He had no real power after this. Pace of reform slowed down even more, especially political reforms. Deng and other party members became even more cautious of not giving power to anyone remotely like Hu. 2 years later, on April 15th, 1989, Hu started feeling dizzy during an official meeting. Asked to be excused for a minute.
He's got poison.
And as he was walking away, he collapsed to the ground with a fatal heart attack.
Really?
One of the most powerful and popular leaders just a few years ago had just died.
Seems a little
Students
suspicious.
and workers alike felt that they had just lost their hope for freedom, their hope for democracy. So they took to the street to mourn Hu's death. As the darkness of the night set in, mourning turned to protesting. Students started shouting slogans in favor of freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. At some universities, students started signing petitions to demand that the party hold a state funeral for Yao Bang to the highest standards.
Sign your life away.
By the next morning, news had spread everywhere in China. People were starting to gather at the monument to the people's heroes in Tiananmen Square to mourn the passing. It was still a small crowd at the square, maybe 100, 200 at most, but many state newspapers published pictures and reports from this gathering. Now, this seemed like a normal thing. Some angry people, but mostly just people grieving.
Wow,
the CCP
dude,
didn't
that's
like
a lot
this
of people.
They thought the newspaper covering the story is just going to push more people to go to the square and mourn. Li Peng, China's premier at the time, wrote, "The consequences will be chaos in the social order." Little did he know what was about to happen. Whether it was papers or it was the CCP being unhappy with the papers, the next day, 600 people marched to the square. The CCP saw the growing support, and the funeral
600?
committee decided to
Is
announce
that a
the
lot?
highest level funeral for Yao Bang.
That's a lot.
where 4,000 people would be allowed at the viewing ceremony and 100,000 people at the memorial ceremony the next day.
100,000?
After the announcement, Premier Lei Peng comes in and says no to the 100,000 people gathering.
Wow, that's
Letting
crazy.
the masses pay their respect to Yao Bang's remains will inevitably cause even greater chaos in society. Clearly, this
Bait and
seemed like
switch.
too much to the students. The party isn't even letting them mourn the death of their beloved leader, one who was also a high-ranking member of the party. In response, universities around the country started putting up posters to tell the public that they should just go to Tiananmen Square to pay their respects. Posters also included suggestions like autocratic politics should be abolished, a new democratic political order should be established, and there should be a review of major mistakes made during the 10 years of reform, with those responsible to resign.
Well, how I don't want to I don't want to say this the wrong way, but what does a politician have to do for you to be that involved into it? You know what I mean? Like there's some people that volunteer to do free work to support their politicians. Like let's say a mayor's getting elected or a governor, people go around canvassing. I used to do it because there's money in it, but some people do it for free. Like they're like, "Oh, vote for this governor." They do it for free. I'm like, "What? I'm not doing that unless I'm getting paid." They're just doing it out the kindness of their own heart, which is crazy. Like imagine just working for free because you want to. What are you doing? You don't get anything in return. What are you doing? Like these students travel from different provinces, different regions just to mourn his death. That means he's done something like so great to change your life. But honestly, grieving for death, it's that grieving for someone's death is kind of what's that word called? Selfish. I was said that to I was told this by my high school teacher. They're like, to mourn someone's death, you are selfish. I'm like, how the fuck? I mean, for me, it's like it's just nature. It has to happen to everyone. You just have to accept it. But for others, they just cry their eyes out. But there's only so much you can cry. What are you gonna do? Bring them back to life? Are you gonna pour a potion on them? They come back to life? Makes no sense. If they die, they die. But he was saying, death is selfish because what do you mourn? Why are you sad? You're sad because you miss the good times you had with that person. You're sad because you love that person and they're no longer here. The memories you had with them, your experiences, that's what makes it selfish. You only care about your own feelings that you had with that person, your experiences. Hmm. So for that many people to come and mourn his death, that's kind of crazy. That's a lot of people. It's like 100,000. That amount of people like, in just general area, it's fine. But to have them all come together for one single reason, it's a little powerful. It's a little crazy. I think that's why they're like, oh, this can't happen. They can't come.
Resign. Basically, the message was go to Tiananmen Square and we will change China.
Hmm.
And people actually started going. Thousands of
Yo,
students from
what?
many different universities marched overnight to the square.
Look at that. They march overnight. Did they? there's no way. Did they destroy these trucks? If you look at it, it's like burned. It's like exploded. They're playing the guitar. It's a vibe.
Square. Then went to the entrance of the Great Hall of China and demanded to meet Premier Li. They had 7 demands for him. The major one being affirm Hu Yaobang's views on democracy and freedom as correct. Someone took these demands to Li Peng, and Li took them to Zhaoxiang. Here we see 2 factions forming already in how to respond to the crowd that seems to be growing exponentially.
Yo, that is a lot of people. That's 100,000? No way. That's insane. That amount of people, like, you're gonna change some stuff. Just that, you know, when the government is corrupt and they have unlimited firepower, and you don't have any guns, you don't have any First Amendment, you can't really do anything. In America, at least we can own guns. Certain states, not all states.
Especially at Tiananmen Square. Li is an old school communist. He wants to stop the morning before things get out of hand, while Xiao wants to let people be as long as there's no breaking or looting. As we will learn in the coming days, Xiao is in fact a lot closer to Yaobang's school of thought. He wants these students to have freedom and stuff, while Li wants to control every little thing and crush any sign of rebellion the moment it happens. At the end of the day, students are left to be, while police are instructed to keep a close eye by Li. He orders them to squash anything problematic as soon as they catch it and before things get out of hand. By the next day, the crowd had grown to 10,000 people at the square.
Oh, what?
In just 4
That picture before was way more than 10,000. Definitely way more than 10,000, was it? No way.
days, it went from 100 to 10,000, and it will just continue going up. From now on, we will have a counter of the rough number of protesters with the date here on the screen. The next day, something quite inciting happened. Some police officers patrolling around the square found 3 students alone, and they started just roughing them up. In return, students chanted things like, "They will take down the dictatorship. To want freedom is not a crime." This led to cops really beating up the students so badly that one of them fell unconscious. This news spread like wildfire and rejuvenated whatever momentum the protest was losing. Many more universities decided to take part in the protest and march to the square. Student leaders also said that if the CCP doesn't respond to their 7 demands soon, they will start calling on workers, farmers, intellectuals, and other people from all walks of life to support the demonstrations. As the sun set on the 21st of April,
when you start demanding stuff from something that's way bigger than you, the military, they have unlimited firepower, it's obvious who's going to win. And when you threaten them by calling more people to your cause, they're gonna bring some drastic measures. They're not just gonna take it. If they just take it, imagine how that looks for the government. Imagine how they look to the public. So they weren't gonna take it.
More than 50,000 people were at Tiananmen Square.
Wow.
Worse yet, the Yaobang Memorial was the next morning, and police were ordered to clear up the streets for the vehicles that were expected to arrive. The country's top leadership, like Deng Xiaoping...
Bro, I keep seeing videos in America. It's like, police shootout. I never see that in China. I never see a cop shootout. Do they even have guns in China? I don't even know. Never seen them. Like, usually it's just some security guy. Never seen a shootout in China.
Ping, Xiao, and Li Peng are expected to attend. It seemed like an impossible...
You know what's crazy? There's no shootouts, but there's extremes. It's either no shootouts, no guns, or they bring the tanks out like Tiananmen Square.
Possible task. By midnight, the number had grown to 400,000 people.
Bro, what? That's a huge jump. What did it jump from? 50,000 to 400,000?
By midnight, the number had grown to 400,000 people.
How the
as students from all universities had come for a memorial service. This was
That's
the first
insane.
large-scale, unofficial demonstration that had happened in China since the establishment of the Chinese Communist Party in 1949. The military commissioner actually just had to come out and negotiate with the student leaders to clear the passage for guests for the memorial, as the force wasn't going to work against nearly 500,000 people.
Yeah.
Luckily, an agreement was made and students were guaranteed mourning in peace and
strength in numbers. And also, that's a lot of people. Like, imagine you fuck something up and you have to kill 500,000 people. That looks so bad on you.
They were, in return, expected to maintain order. The morning of the 22nd, the memorial went as planned. The crowd was so big that everyone couldn't enter the square. The line stretched as far as 10 miles or 16 kilometers from the gates, as everyone arrived to pay their respects. A turnout this big that surprised and even scared the party leaders, who were all in attendance. After the memorial, anger started spreading across the student masses. Student leaders went to the
Anger.
entrance of the Great Hall and knelt on the steps with demands in their hands. But no leader came out to meet with the students. This in turn made the students more angry, and the crowds started roaring. There was a wave of rioting in the square. As students from higher universities left the square to return home, they decided to organize an indefinite strike from classes until the CCP listened to their demands. This turns into a much bigger deal as teachers and workers will join the strikes too.
Oh wow.
After the funeral, the next day,
They just got everyone to join. And I think it's a perfect mixture. It's like someone just died that was your new hope of freedom, and he just died. And all that sadness, all that sorrow, it's it's some type of emotion, but you can only cry so much. And after the crying, it's like, all right, now where do I put all that emotion into? Now I'm gonna put it into anger because it's not happening the way I want it. And when 500,000 people, when 400,000 people think the same way, it's kind of dangerous. It's how revolts happen, like right now.
Cao Xiang leaves for North Korea. Remember, he's the cool
Whoa,
guy and
North
the second in
Korea,
command to Deng. In his absence,
North
Li
Korea.
Peng becomes in charge. Li decided that mourning had turned into turmoil. He believed that there was something behind it, pulling the strings and inciting trouble, and that the movement was an organized and planned political struggle to overthrow the Communist Party. So they made the Central Committee Turmoil Suppression Group. The first thing the committee does is meet with Deng Xiaoping and get him to agree that they need to squash this movement. Remember, Xiao Qiang is still in North Korea, and he was the balancing/cooling head in all of this. After this meeting, Deng therefore wanted to mobilize the people of the entire country and the whole party to stand up and take a clear-cut stand against turmoil, and to try to avoid
Look at that.
bloodshed as much as possible.
They're like, oh shit, there's way too many people. What do we do? That's crazy. I didn't know that 400,000 people were at Tiananmen Square when it happened. It probably disappeared, like lessened by the time, but as of right now, they're like, oh shit, we can't get overthrown. We got to show them who's boss. We got to use firepower.
Possible. But it is impossible to avoid this possibility entirely. We are still very far from June 4th. But the de facto
Whoa,
leader
June
had just
4th.
told his commanders that
It's like
bloodshed
another
is
month
likely
or
to
two,
happen.
month and a half.
Just, minimize it as much as possible. Li took these words and decided to publish an editorial in the state newspaper the next day titled, "We must take a clear-cut stand against turmoil." The editorial classified the mourning events for Hu Yaobang and the protests by students and members of the general public that had just taken place over the previous few days as serious incidents of beating, smashing, looting, and burning, and as turmoil incited by a very small number of people with ulterior motives.
Small
Basically
number.
saying anyone against the party is a danger to society and needs to be purged. This raised the stakes for protesting students. They are now being called traitors for trying to improve the country and uproot corruption. They are trying to follow in Hu Yaobang's footsteps, and the party is saying they need to be purged. This April 26th editorial turned what was, so far, mostly mourning and anger into full-on protest. Student leaders went public, now
It's
calling for
moving a
everyone to
little
take to the
slow.
street and condemn the editorial. In return, the party announced that the commemoration of Hu Yaobang had ended, and more demonstrations moving forward would be illegal. Many students decided to march on April 27th anyway, knowing full well it might be their last march. A
Wow,
huge
that's
majority of those who
insane.
marched had written their final testament, a death note, and left their
That's like the recent Palestine marches. They had it at my school. I was at them because, well, I had finals, and right after finals, I was like, oh, this is cool. I just joined it, see how it was. But it's just the last day was kind of crazy. The cops were called. They were like, all right, if you don't clear it out, we're not meeting your demands. They did meet some of the demands. But the last day, I was like, I'm gonna go. Where did I go? I went somewhere to eat. Then I came back. They had news helicopters everywhere. They had SWAT, like a whole squad of sheriff. It's kind of crazy. Like 17 sheriff cars just pulled up. A whole motorcade. Cops with bikes. Everyone showed up. I was like, dude, I don't think I should be here. I was like, dude, am I gonna be in the middle of the open fire shootout? So I was like, all right, I gotta go.
Left their dorms before marching. Many contained words to the effects of, "I'm heading out tomorrow, and I'm prepared not to come back. I hope future generations will remember why we made the sacrifice." The April
Hmm.
27th demonstration had so many people that it had now become the biggest since the founding of
Whoa, what? April 27th. That's so long until June 4th. I think it's the anticipation. It builds it up, you know.
the CCP.
You know what I'm
Protests were
saying?
happening all across the country, but by far the largest ones
Across
occurred
the
in
country.
Beijing. Students from all the universities decided to march to Tiananmen Square while people lined up on the roads to cheer them on. Roughly 200,000 students joined the march to the square, and more than 1 million people lined up to cheer them on. And even with such huge numbers, there was still no conflict. The army was brought in to stop the protesters, but students started chanting slogans like, "People's army loves its people." In the end, the army did not have the numbers to stop the demonstrations, probably didn't have the will either. Now, the foreign press is covering the protests, and that's how big
Yo, I'm surprised they don't have any opposition. Is everyone in on it? What does that number say? That says a million? So is everyone in it together? Like everyone just wants freedom and their opponent is the government? That's what I'm saying. Because if there's if there's a debate here or like a protest here, there's gonna be people on the opposing team. Like, oh no, there's like woke, there's red pill, there's woke. If there's a woke whatever, there's gonna be a bunch of red pill like refuting it, conflicting. But here it's just everyone's like, oh, we want freedom.
That's how big things are getting. There was so much pressure on the party that it had to let the state news media report on the demonstration because the public was getting angry about the news suppression that was happening over the last few days. This kind
Hmm.
of tied Premier Lee's hands, and he had to instruct officials to start a dialogue with the students. In reality, this dialogue attempt was really all just for show. The party refused to talk with actual leaders, instead just pretended to listen to the students who had their demands handwritten by the party officials themselves. So the true leaders of the demonstration
Oh,
decided to call
what?
this dialogue attempt a BS move and took it to the media, calling for Lee to meet with them in a televised debate.
That's
Things were getting
crazy.
so out of hand that on the 30th of April, Chow had to end his trip and return from North Korea. In the next Politburo meeting, Chow advocated that they should continue to focus on persuasion, conduct multi-level, multi-channel, multi-form dialogue, and resolutely
Propaganda.
persuade students to resume classes as soon as possible. He
Propaganda.
also mentioned that the Communist Party must adapt to the new era and new situations, and learn to solve new problems by means of democracy and rule of law. Li Peng and his allies argue that social stability must be restored before any reforms can be considered. Li Peng also believed Deng was on his side, since the meeting they had while Zhao was in North Korea. On May 4th, the students tried one last big show of a demonstration to get the dialogue from the party, but nothing really happened. Zhao did publicly acknowledge his support for the students' demands in a speech to bankers. He called them patriots and directly contradicted Li Peng's April editorial. This caused even more infighting in the party.
Whoa.
But after the May 4th march, the movement started dying off. 80% of students around the country
That's
had returned to
crazy.
class, and only a dedicated few
Internal
from Beijing were now
conflict.
continuing the class strikes and demonstrations. But tensions still persisted within the party, and patience was not an option anymore for party leaders. You see, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev was coming for a summit on May 15th, the first visit by a Russian leader in 30 years. The Soviets and China had a falling out in the late 1950s, and this was the first attempt at repairing those relationships. Deng did not want to be embarrassed by student protests in the Tiananmen Square, as that's where Gorbachev's welcoming ceremony was going to be held. So he ordered Xiao to get rid of all the protesters from the square. Xiao used his soft approach and tried negotiating with the students. He thought he could make an emotional appeal to students, and they would listen, as he has shown his support for their movement sincerely in the past. But the students refused to leave the square. They knew the Gorbachev visit meant there was a lot of press freedom in China, and even foreign journalists were going to be there.
Look at that. That's pressure. That's leverage. When you have leverage over something, you can control it. Like for in this case, it's like, oh, they know this guy's coming. Like they said, it's like a bunch of foreign press. They don't want China doesn't want to be embarrassed to other nations. So they have leverage. They're not gonna leave. They have the upper hand. If they leave, they're not gonna get it again. Like for example, my college, they had the upper hand because they were protesting during finals. And they had to send a bunch of emails. Like if you skip your final and you went to the protest, it's like it's still a zero. We're not gonna give you a free pass because you protested. So they protested then because it was finals. If it wasn't finals, they would not have leverage. They would not have their demands met because it's whatever. Yeah, just yeah, live outside, live in a tent. But because it was finals, they had the upper hand, and because people were coming to what was it? Russia was coming. They don't want to be embarrassed because of the people protesting. That's why they had the upper hand. If they leave, they're like, God, this is like once in a lifetime. So they're gonna double down. That's insane.
Be there. To take advantage of the situation and put more pressure on the government, around 1,000 students announced a hunger strike in Tiananmen Square on May 13th, 2 days
Hunger
before
strike.
Gorbachev's arrival. By now, the students' main demand was simple: retract the April 26th editorial and
I don't get the hunger strike. What does that do? Like, okay, you're starving yourself. If it was like a cruel leader, he'll be like, okay, what do you want me to do? Force you to eat? That's crazy. Interest. Like, I actually don't understand what hunger strike is gonna do. Like, for a leader that will bend, that will fold, he's gonna care. But if a leader like, if you say that to Kim Jong Un, he's just gonna look at you and be like, "What? What are they saying? Yeah, yeah, don't eat more for the other people."
and rebrand the movement as patriotic and democratic. Students clarified that they have no plans to overthrow the government, they just want Yao Bang's reforms to be implemented quicker. News of the hunger strike helped galvanize the movement once again. People started coming in from all around the country, and marches were carried out in many different provinces. You see, in China, hunger and food is kind of a sensitive and emotional topic for many citizens. China has experienced some of the worst famines in human history. In fact, there were many citizens who had lost family members because of it in their lifetime. So when students announced a hunger strike, it really hit a chord with many citizens. They started paying more attention to student demands, especially since the press actually had some freedom now to cover it on a day-to-day basis. Because of increased momentum, Gorbachev's welcoming ceremony was moved to the airport, but the summit was still held at the Great Hall, where the students were on hunger strike, right outside. During the meeting with Gorbachev, Xiao reaffirms to him that Deng Xiaoping is the leader of China, and the CCP, even though he has no official position at the top. That's because just a few years back, Deng eliminated the position of chairman because he didn't want someone like Mao to take over the party and become bigger than the party. After eliminating the chairman position, general secretary was the highest position in the CCP, which was Xiao, but in reality Deng was still the main leader. So that's what Xiao was clarifying to Gorbachev, but Deng took this to mean that Xiao was putting the blame of the protesters outside on Deng, saying that he is the leader. The divide between Deng and Xiao is growing, and we have to remember Xiao, much like Yao Bang, is in the camp of more freedom for citizens, faster reform. Most importantly, let's not use force on students who are protesting for relatively, well, reasonable things. Xiao is the leader of the camp that is trying to balance out Li Peng and the old-school leaders who want to crush the student protesters. Over the next few days, as the summit progressed, the support for students only grew, and the movement had now regained all of its lost momentum. That's why even after Gorbachev left, many foreign journalists decided to stay in Beijing to continue covering these student protests. And it's a big reason why we have the footage from the massacre. As we will soon cover, the CCP tried everything in its power to make sure no one sees what happened that night. So, on May 17th, the top brass of the CCP meets at Deng's house. Here, Xiao is saying, let's just retract the editorial. That's all they're asking for.
Oh, it's back down to 200,000.
But now Deng is fighting against Xiao, not just Li Peng. Deng says that Xiao made a mistake, publicly supporting the students and telling them their demands are reasonable. Now, they know there is division in the CCP, which gives them even more power. So Deng decides that there is no other options but to declare martial law and send in the military. At this meeting, Xiao knew he had lost all the influence he had over Deng and all the power in the party. But still, he couldn't bring himself to be general secretary of a party that was about to use the army on its students. So he wrote a resignation letter and planned to submit it. He was moments away from submitting when someone close to him convinced him to not do so, as that will only escalate the situation and likely make matters worse for the students and his family. So, instead of resigning, he takes a leave of absence from the party during a meeting. He tells his colleague before leaving that his life mission ends here. Then he goes to visit the students one last time, addressing them with a megaphone. He urges them to end the hunger strike and continue their movement some other way, as many students on the strike are getting extremely weak now. Many could tell, with the way he was talking, that he was done. This was his goodbye to the students and, as it turned out, his last public appearance. And the students actually felt it too, as many started crying while he was speaking. At the end of his speech, Xiao bowed to the students in the square to show his respect one last time and walked away from the square as he knew he couldn't face what was about to happen. Clearly, this resonated with students and angered the remaining top leaders at the CCP. The next day, Li announced martial law on state television, and 250,000 soldiers were ready to march into Beijing. Student leaders learned of the plan to declare martial law, and they called off their hunger strike. Instead, they staged a mass sit-in in Tiananmen Square that drew about 1.2 million supporters, including members of the police and military and industrial workers.
What they
say?
The
movement had 1.2 million supporters called off their hunger strike. Instead, they staged a mass sit-in in Tiananmen Square that drew about 1.2 million supporters, including members of the police and military and industrial workers. The movement had garnered so much support.
Oh, even the police sat in?
Students and workers stood at major entry points into the city, forming a human wall to stop the military from entering. More than 1 million people. On top of that, there were members of the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, who were joining the protesters, and many retired PLA generals wrote to the CCP opposing martial law. There was a standstill between the army and protesters blocking the entry, and it lasted for 4 long days. Many soldiers were from Beijing and nearby cities, so they had family members who were at the protest, some even standing in front of them. This was clearly an emotional moment, so soldiers themselves, they couldn't bring themselves to use force on people they knew and people who made emotional pleas to them. Sometimes protesters actually provided food and water for soldiers and shared a meal with them. So the army couldn't break through and had to withdraw and set up bases outside of the city. Protesters saw this as a turning of the tide. They thought the army was on their side. The public was on their side. All they had to do was get party officials to see this and everything would fall.
Yeah, that's insane. Imagine you get imagine you get what's that called? Drafted, and the people you have to kill are in your own town. Imagine seeing those faces when you were kids, and now you're being sent here to kill everyone. Well, not kill everyone, but like keep them from doing anything stupid. If they do anything stupid, then you got to do what you got to do. That's a tough bullet to bite.
Fall into place. But in reality, the army did not withdraw to give up. They withdrew to regroup. In fact, the CCP decided to bring in even more soldiers for a final assault. Soldiers from
Where are they getting these soldiers? They just pull them out of my ass or something?
So there would not be these emotional issues anymore. The army was planning on coming in, and this time they were not letting human roadblocks stop them. That night was just a calm before one of the deadliest storms. In the meantime, Beijing was the freest...
Okay. So they get soldiers from other regions that don't know anyone in this region. Now they don't know you. They don't care. They don't care who you are because they don't know you. They could shoot a bullet through your head.
City in China. There was no police presence and all the free press. In Tiananmen Square, the atmosphere was jubilant. But at the government headquarters, Deng Xiaoping is devising a new offensive to end the protest. By June 2nd, troops had started covertly moving into the city in civilian clothes to avoid attention. Tens of thousands of troops actually walked through the city in plain clothes and went into the Great Hall from a side entrance. Then, weapons and gear were transported into the Great Hall through local buses for these soldiers. Around 25,000...
Yo, that's some movie type shit. Like, if you come in full on guns blazing, you can't get in. But if you just dress normally and pretending like nothing's happening, you sneak in, sneak the supplies in, and then you're inside already, and they don't even know. They think you're a fellow protester.
1,000 soldiers entered the Great Hall by the end of the night. This time the plan was to squeeze the protesters from both sides. The PLA would march from the outside of the city, while soldiers in the Great Hall would move forward from the inside of the city. Some protesters had already begun to notice the PLA soldiers in plain clothes, and fights had broken out in multiple places in the city. Some buses carrying weapons and supplies were also intercepted by protesters.
Someone started yapping. They're like, yeah, we on this mission. Yeah, someone started yapping.
Which led to even more anger among the students. Clashes were picking up all over the city as police and soldiers tried to get into position. This news quickly traveled up to the top, and Deng Xiaoping decided to give the final order to his general. He gave his troops the authority to use all possible methods to clear the square. This was the ultimate permission to kill from the head of the party.
Yo.
The next day, plans to march into the city were set in motion. The government issued an emergency announcement urging citizens to stay off the streets and away from Tiananmen Square. Once the word spread that hundreds of thousands of soldiers are planning on entering the city once again, the citizens flooded the streets in hopes of mounting the same defense as a week prior. At 8 p.m., June 3rd, 1989, the onslaught had begun. The army marched down
all methods possible, all possible methods.
No matter what. When they first encountered protesters' blockades, troops fired rubber bullets and tear gas, while protesters threw rocks and bottles. As this didn't scare off the protesters, warning shots were fired in the air. After 10 minutes of warnings, it seemed the protesters were not budging. So, at 10:10 p.m., soldiers were ordered to lower the weapons into the crowd and start firing. Troops began open firing indiscriminately, and tanks started ramming through barricades and people alike, with no care for anyone's life. The crowd was stunned. They couldn't believe that their army was using live ammunition on its own citizens. As troops moved deeper into the city, the firing got even more indiscriminate, killing protesters and bystanders alike. Some soldiers even started shooting at people who were just watching from their apartment balconies.
No way.
Around 1:30 a.m., troops had reached Tiananmen Square from the west. Soon, troops from other directions arrived too. By 2 a.m., students who had survived decided to leave the square any way they could. In the next hour, the student leaders agreed to the CCP demands to leave in order to ensure everyone's safety. At 5:23 a.m., a Chinese unit crushed the Goddess of Democracy statue, removing its severed torch first as a memento.
I don't know if you saw the population or the count of the people in the crowd. It turned to 0.
The next morning, many civilians tried re-entering the square, but it was blocked off by infantry. Many of these people were parents of demonstrators who were in the square just last night. Many still had no clue what had happened to their kids, their brothers, their sisters.
Crazy.
Everyone was panicking as they could see bloodshed and bodies on the side of the roads. This is where the famous Tank Man scene is from.
Tank
Here,
Man.
the guy is stopping a tank. then climbing on top of it and talking to the driver, likely asking about lost family members he had been searching for. He was soon removed from the street and was never seen again. The way that we have most of this information is through Chinese and foreign journalists who risked their lives to report on this massacre. Many had to hide the film in things like teapots to smuggle it out of China, because troops were deleting and destroying anything they could get their hands on. The death toll is a topic of debate to this day, where the CCP claims only 200 people died, all of which were American operatives trying to overthrow the government, while some independent foreign agencies claim that the number was as high as 20,000 people. For so many families, it was a day they will never forget. But for the CCP, it's a day that nothing happened. June 4th, 1989. YouTube just dropped a...
That's an insane event that happened. They just sweep it under the rug. I mean, we have a couple of those recently. Well, not too recent, but recently it's like the Palestine war. I don't condone for war in any way. Anything that involves killing people, there's no need for it. It's not like why is everyone enemies? The default for humans should just be nice. Like, yeah, you could conquer a bunch of land, but I think open source is the best, because open source, everyone can use it, and more people can improve on it. Unless if you make it privatized, like saying, oh, we only work for America, oh, we only work for Korea, then the whole world is fighting by themselves. The whole world is trying to improve by themselves. But if you were to imagine how much we can get done if every country got together and be like, oh, okay, we're the best at this, we're going to do this to the best of our ability. You're going to do that because you do that the best. Like, let's say China is best at making computer chips. They're going to focus on that. America is good at making, I don't know, food. No. America is good at growing corn. They have a lot of corn, they have a lot of soybeans. They'll focus on that. Like, each country has their own thing. And if everyone works together, it'd be insane. But no, we're humans and we like to separate each other and think we're better than every other country. That's humans. But if in a perfect world, if everyone worked together, that'd be insane. If an alien came to Earth and they see, oh, they're not working together because his skin is different, or oh, they all speak different languages, they're gonna go back and be like, yeah, I think they're still animals. They're still primates. But yeah, that'll be all for today. That's Tiananmen Square 2.0. Um, it's about the recent one, but it gives us history about the past, like how Tiananmen Square came to effect. But the most recent, which is was it the dean of the schools, two of them, they signed their names and have their faces and pictures on the manifesto. That's insane. But it might be the start of a Black Swan event. No one thinks it's gonna happen, but it's gonna happen.